I love the little creepy noise, but I'm very excited to begin. So, did you want to start with how you found law and cannabis, or maybe why
Sure.
you do what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, after I graduated law school, I went and worked at a big firm in Chicago doing business litigation, businesses suing each other for breach of contract, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, things like that. And I did that for a good um, 14 years, basically, of being like a law firm lawyer, doing litigation. So it's sort of typical, I would say. And then in 2014, Illinois legalized medical marijuana. I had not been paying any attention, had nothing to do with the law, hadn't read it, but there were some news articles like around January 1 of 2014. Here are some new laws that have gone into effect in Illinois. And one of them was medical marijuana. Huh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that happened. And I have always been passionate about uh, you know, cannabis should be legal. I never understood why it was illegal. When I was in college, I volunteered for Normal, like I was always a supporter, but certainly had like a busy day job and didn't really think a whole lot about it. But then when I took the law off the internet and it was very unique at that point. I think it was the 14th state to legalize, but I think it was the first one or second one to do it legislatively. Every other state had done it via ballot initiative where it's basically a popular vote of like, do we want to legalize or not? And the details get left for later. And you don't necessarily have bipartisan support in those instances. Illinois did it legislatively. We don't have a ballot initiative process. And that means that all the legislators, in the House and Senate for Illinois have to work out a bill and it has to pass, bipartisan. You can't do it, just with Democratic support. So this thing got hashed out, no pun intended, on a level that like, was really shocking to me. And the level of detail included like there are going to be 60 dispensaries, 21 cultivation facilities. Here's the requirements of like what the packaging has to say. This is the type of security system you have to have. This is how big your vault has to be and how it has to be constructed. I mean, the level of detail was crazy to me. But it was really helpful and inspiring because I'm like, okay, this industry literally does not exist today, January 1, 2014. But starting this year, this entire new industry is going to land in Illinois. And we know what it's going to look like because it's governed by this law.
Mhm.
However, I also know non-lawyers hate reading laws, much less like a 150-page statute full of like legal terms and statutory references and all that. That's like not most people's idea of a good time. But I was very comfortable reading the law and kind of knew how to boil it down to like what it was trying to accomplish. So I got really interested and decided my best way to kind of learn the law was to give continuing legal education presentations about it. So I started doing that. Like, okay, step one, is it even ethical for me as an attorney to practice cannabis law, to get involved? Because I don't want to lose my law license. So step one, I gave up like a, continuing ed presentation on that. And,
Okay. I think I lost you for a sec.
so my conclusion was like, it is ethical. You can't pass a law and then say you're, oh no, am I back? Am I back?
Been out
Oh,
for a fuzzy minute, but I could hear you, just not see you.
oh, okay. Yeah, it says my connection is unstable for some reason. Sorry about that. Can you
I
hear me
think
now?
I have a conspiracy theory that it's Zoom because every time I never have any issues on Teams, but always Zoom. But I can hear you, so we could jump right
Okay.
back.
Okay. All right. Um, so I concluded it was ethical for me. I wasn't going to lose my law license if I was helping clients interpret the law.
Mhm.
So that was good. Then I looked at employment law, you know, and sort of I just kept picking topics and giving presentations about them just to teach myself. But I still had my day job as a litigator at a law firm. This was just Friday nights, me sitting on the couch making PowerPoints like a total dork. And
Like
then
a passion
finding,
project almost.
huh?
Is it like a passion project?
Totally a passion project. The people I worked with knew I was doing this because I was giving some lunchtime presentations to lawyers because everyone always needs continuing ed credits. So by just sitting and listening to my lunchtime presentation about the marijuana law, they could get a credit. So they were amused, let's just say. And then I got introduced to a group that was going to apply for these very competitive licenses. Again, they were only giving out 60 dispensary licenses, which is like a store, a retail store, and then 21 cultivation licenses. So I knew it was going to be real competitive. And I just had this feeling that my legal background was going to be helpful in terms of how to approach these licenses. So I got hired to help a group apply. And we were all kind of making it up as we went along, but we were very successful. We won, three of the 21 cultivation licenses and one of the dispensary licenses. And that translated to, oh my goodness, like we have a business here. Like this is real. This is happening. We're going to be allowed to grow and sell marijuana in Illinois. Like, I can't believe this. And I was like, I'm in. Like, they needed a lawyer. They needed a lawyer who was passionate about it. I'd already taught myself a lot about the law just on my own time. So I was up to speed. So we just hit the ground running. I quit my job as a partner at a law firm. Everybody thought I was completely crazy. This was, early 2015.
We're still a
The
little taboo. Like,
It was still taboo. The industry itself hadn't launched, so most people weren't even aware that Illinois had legalized medical marijuana. So they just thought I was just doing something totally illegal, totally risky. A lot of people, were worried I would lose my law license or ruin my sort of otherwise, good reputation as a law firm lawyer. Like all I heard was risk and fear and no and don't. And somehow I was like, nope, I see this. This is real. I'm doing this. So I'm glad I listened to my own gut and didn't listen to, all the fearful people around me. And that February 2015 was when I, stopped being a law firm lawyer and became a cannabis lawyer.
which is absolutely amazing to hear. Because, like, one, I can see your attention to detail and how that helped you grow from studying on your own to saying, okay, I'm going to take this on. But when you're talking about ignoring all of those no's, don't do it, very smaller scale process. But I went through the same thing of, do I take this minor in cannabis studies? Do I put it on my LinkedIn? Do I talk about it on my resume? And ultimately, the answer from everyone was no. I said
Hmm.
yes. And then talking to people that I'm working with now, they were like, actually, we took a double take. And when we asked you about it and you're talking about why you took interest in it, that shows a lot more than you not saying anything and having this passion project and just kind of doing it at home. So it's really inspiring for other students to hear, like, yes, you can do this and you can be successful and not feed into all of these negative stereotypes. So, kind of launching
Yes.
from that, I recently talked to a woman with coming from a finance standpoint. So, coming from a law standpoint, can you talk a little bit about limited and unlimited licenses? Because I know Illinois is limited.
Hmm.
So, from a business perspective in one way, but also from a law, can you talk about your experience in working with limited and then how that compares to unlimited?
Sure. So you're right. Like, different states have, one of the things sort of stepping back is big picture, cannabis is still federally illegal. And what we have going here is a state by state experiment, which with each state deciding for itself, do we want to legalize medical and or recreational or not at all? And if we do want to legalize some form of it, what do we want that to look like? And I would say each state program kind of to some degree reflects the personality of that state. So no surprise, the West Coast, unlimited licenses, truly the Wild West. If you have a few $1,000 to buy a license to grow or sell marijuana, go for it, do it, go compete. And there's just very little barrier to entry there, which is really, kind of fun and cool because you get to be entrepreneurial. But then the reality is there's been massive kind of oversupply. There are, way too many people growing cannabis, way too many people selling. So,
Mhm.
from a financial perspective, if you're an investor or business operator, in Washington, Oregon, or California, you've probably lost a lot of money and you may have gone out of business. Very hard to succeed. Um, in contrast, Illinois, like I said, in 2014, they were like 60 stores for a state of 14 million people. Like that right away said to me and my, founding group that I'm with, like, holy crap, that is built-in market share that like is so unusual for any industry to say like, you're going to serve potentially 14 million people and you're only one of 60 groups that can do that. Like that's kind of unheard of, right? And New York was even more limited. There were only 10 licenses for the state of New York. Like, just think about that, right? So limited license markets, very expensive to win one of those licenses. I mean, you can spend millions of dollars literally just applying for this license. And if you don't win, that money is gone. So you need a lot of investors behind you. You need a lot of expertise behind you. I mean, we wound up applying, my group, applying for these limited licenses in multiple states. We have a very good winning track record. I think we won everywhere once we kind of figured out the formula, but it was expensive every time and extremely competitive. So there's a lot of criticism for that because obviously it's not such a level playing field as on the West Coast where kind of pretty much anybody can scrape together the money to apply and get I mean, you're not even really applying. You're just buying a license for a few $1,000s. So barrier to entry, not really there, pretty free and accessible to everybody, but really hard to make a living. Limited license, very expensive to apply, very expensive to win. But if you are fortunate enough to win, your market share is sort of built in and you're much more likely to actually run a profitable business.
Which is definitely interesting to hear because when we're learning about it from a cannabis studies program perspective, it's more so a very, very broad, brief overview because they have such limited amount of credits to get in a plethora of information. So there's obviously ups and downs to both, and ups and downs come with everything. So leading into that, we talked a little bit about the downs, maybe not the downs of getting into cannabis, but what maybe people perceive. So from your experience, can you talk about your favorite up and then your least favorite down from working in the cannabis space?
My favorite up. There was just nothing more exciting than doing a startup business in a startup industry. I mean, I think I really truly had sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity where an industry literally did not exist in our state. Just imagine if like, there were no dry cleaners, let's say, in the entire state of Illinois. And somebody said, okay, well, we're going to bring dry cleaning to Illinois, but we're only going to have 60 dry cleaners for the entire state of Illinois.
You're
And,
gonna be
you
one of
know,
the dry cleaners.
yeah, and 21 people who make the dry cleaning equipment that you need to run the store. And have the chance to be in on the ground floor of that. Like, oh my goodness. Because you can see there's going to be more than 60 dry cleaners eventually. Like we knew, okay, the state of Illinois, they're starting with 60 dispensaries because that's how much they can regulate. It's a highly regulated industry. You've got, an already stretched, overloaded state government that's underfunded and people are overworked and whatever. They can only manage to regulate so much of this industry. So they wanted to keep it real small in the beginning, but it was clear with a population of 14 million, it was going to expand. So getting to help build an industry from the ground floor, like that's a unique and amazing opportunity. And that's part of why you have to take those chances, right? Sure, we could have applied and failed, or I could have decided it wasn't for me. It could have gone sort of a different direction, 8 million different directions. But the fact that I saw that it was, a risk, but a really fun risk, like what an adventure, to bring legalized cannabis to a state. So that was awesome. And then I'd come from law firm world where literally it's what your job is most of the time is just to point out risk for clients. So your whole mindset at all times is scouting for risk. Where could things go wrong? Where could there be a problem? What should we be thinking about? And that's a very kind of risk averse mindset to be in at all times. It's kind of a 180 from an entrepreneurial mindset. Entrepreneurs love risk. They know risk is where the reward is. So they look for risk that's a good risk, but without risk, you're not really going to make any money, right? So you need that like good risk reward ratio. So the biggest up for me was like entrepreneurial industry, and then also leaving behind all the risk averse lawyers I was working with for 14 years and suddenly joining a group of entrepreneurs who had done other startups, loved risk, didn't mind that things could go wrong. It was okay as long as a risk wasn't fatal to the company. Like, okay, mistakes are going to happen or problems are going to come up. We're going to solve them and we're going to keep going. And it truly changed my mindset. It kind of undid all the lawyer fearful stuff that had been happening in my brain for 15 years and sort of changed my lens to like problems are okay, failures are okay, not everything's going to go right, but like just keep going. And I'm sitting here now 10 years later, I think like a different person for having taken the risk. I did get the reward. I mean, we've been very successful. And I've just changed how I approach risk. I'm doing another startup now. Like I'm like, yeah, I never want to go back to kind of like, no offense to anybody, but like kind of boring corporate America, like where
Right.
there's no risk. Sure, it's secure and you can have a nice paycheck and all those things, but you're not really challenging yourself in the same way. Startups are a huge challenge, but to me, there's just nothing more fun. So that's my up. The down, we'll talk about Illinois women in cannabis, but in 2014, as my startup group was getting going, my entire group was all men. Um, all of our investors were men except for one. I was used to this imbalance from the law firm world. I was a partner at a law firm, 20 lawyer firm, one of two female partners, the rest are men, right? So I was used to that male dominated workplace environment. I was used to the judges, my opposing counsel, my clients, like 95% men. So I was used to that. And I got really excited thinking, okay, cannabis is a brand new industry. So it's not dominated by anybody. So this will be an opportunity for women to be at the starting line with men, and we can create a much more equitable industry. And so I co-founded Illinois Women in Cannabis with that exact goal in mind. Like, let's raise awareness for women that this new industry is coming, alert them to the opportunities, support them. Let's have mentoring and networking, and sort of create a kind of a new reality for women in the workplace. So it was idealistic, it was aspirational, but it was really genuine. I really thought on some level, having a fresh start like that would create a new outcome. And we worked really hard at it. And, we still want to see that happen. But 10 years later, um, that reality did not come to fruition. Cannabis is very male dominated at every level, just about, whether it's who owns these very valuable licenses, mostly men, who are the CEOs of most of the companies, men. If you look at the C-suite and most of these companies, it's men. So that's the down. That's the bummer. That's the, thing that, you know, is where there's still just a lot of work to do in this industry.
It sounds like even though maybe a little bit of a down, it could be a bud without opportunity. From experience, like I've been in very male dominant spaces. I'm currently interning at a finance company, and they had a women's program that's no longer there. So there's definitely shifts that are ever changing with gives opportunity. So I know to Paul women in business, I'm always advocating like, hey, cannabis is a part of our business school. Ask me questions about it. Let's talk about it. So it's really cool to hear that even though that is a down, it's such a bud that's up and coming, and there's so many different organizations and different people that are making that stride. And then the up, like I said, just paving that way for other students, saying, cannabis or not, take the risk. You have a career, but at the end of the day, it's your career. You should enjoy what you're doing and challenge yourself every day to get better. So I know we're at time. I just wanted to say thank you again for hopping on a call with me. I'm very excited to collect all of these stories, and then I'll send you an update of the completed version and collection of your story as well as all of the other stories, and then keep you in the loop with any updates on the program as well.
Okay, sure. And I'll just throw out there, I co-created a cannabis law class for Chicago Kent Law School. So, you know, that's like kind of another area if you know of people that, or if you're interested, there's, stories there about, we created the first cannabis law course, I think, in Illinois.
I'm
And
sure our professor would love to have you come speak either to a law class or to one of his general classes because he's always looking for people to come add perspective.
yeah, and I have before. I've known, Steve was an early supporter of, taking cannabis seriously. He's great. I mean, I think it's amazing what he's done. And so, I think that's how he connected us. Like he knows, he knows kind of I'm around. And yeah, I'm just sort of available as a resource on any of these topics if you need it at any time.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. So thank you
All
again.
right.
And you
Yeah.
have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.